I'll just invite the last audience members to please take a seat, and then we'll get started. I can already introduce myself. My name is Lene, and I work for Oxfam. Normally, I'm based in our Geneva office, working on anything related to the humanitarian system and how we're going to reform it. And for Oxfam, that also means working on local humanitarian leadership, which is what brings me here today. I'm very, very pleased to be joined by three outstanding partners of Oxfam today to discuss how networks of local and national actors can help move the needle on local humanitarian leadership. Just to set the stage a little bit for our panel discussion, as you probably know, and as was referenced many times this morning, we have had many years of discussions in the humanitarian system about how to reform it, not least for the past decade with the grand bargain discussions. And throughout these discussions, the issue of localization and how do we localize the humanitarian response has come up over and over again. Yet we see that despite these policy commitments that we as international NGOs, donors, UN agencies have been made, we continue to see a humanitarian system that remains largely centered around international actors, so international NGOs and UN agencies as the main implementers. And we continue to see barriers to local and national actors taking on real leadership and decision-making in the humanitarian response. One of the examples that stand out to me is the latest data from ODI, where they looked at how much funding goes directly to local and national actors. And the latest numbers are from 2024, where only 4.1% of all humanitarian funding went to local and national actors, which means that 95% of funding does not go directly to local and national actors. We also often hear from our partners in Oxfam that local and national actors are often subcontracted to deliver on internationally designed projects. And this is a bit paradoxical because we are exactly localizing because we know that local and national actors are closer to communities, they have the cultural knowledge, the contextual knowledge, but too often they are just asked to implement what we have already put on paper and programs that we have designed externally. Yet, in this slightly gloomy picture about localization and how we have failed to advance on local humanitarian leadership, there are a few good examples that do inspire hope about how we could potentially redesign the humanitarian system. And for me, one of the things that keeps standing out is the way that local and national actors have mobilized themselves into networks. And so we're seeing this across several contexts where local and national actors come together and form a network so that they are able to advocate with one voice. They're meeting donors, UN agencies, others represented through one network. They're able to mobilize resources jointly. They're able to negotiate partnership terms collectively. And we are also seeing that they are getting better access to decision-making spaces when they are organized in this network modality. So to me, in many ways, this shows us a way forward, a way that we could already move towards a more equitable distribution of power in the humanitarian system. So in this context, Oxfam, with great support from the NIA network as well, wanted to organize this panel to ask ourselves a few questions. So we wanted to look at how networks can potentially pave the way for more genuine local humanitarian leadership. We also want to look into what difference it makes when local and national actors work in networks and collectively versus working as many different individual entities. And then we wanted to see a bit what that teaches us about how the humanitarian system can be shifted and how we can shift more power, funding, decision-making, leadership to local and national actors. What can we learn from these network approaches that emerge? To help us unpack these questions, we have three very excellent speakers with us today from Palestine, Colombia, and South Sudan. These are three very different contexts, obviously, but they all had very important lessons to be drawn on how network modalities can enhance local humanitarian leadership. So it's my great pleasure to introduce you to our three panelists. First, I have Modi Inosa with me. She is the Executive Director of Young Women Christians Association in South Sudan. She's a leading voice in South Sudan on advancing gender equality, women's empowerment, and strengthening the voice of local and national actors in the South Sudanese humanitarian response. And importantly as well, just last week, Modi was elected as the chairperson for the women-led organization Pool Network in South Sudan, so have extensive experience with this network in South Sudan. Then next, I want to introduce Mahmoud Hamada, who is on the screen up here. He's a policy communication and advocacy advisor with the Palestinian NGO network. Mahmoud has extensive experience for more than 20 years responding to needs in Gaza and the West Bank. He specializes in advocacy, in partnerships, and managing large-scale humanitarian programs. And also very important to mention, because this came up several times this morning, Mahmoud was also recently elected to be a representative of local and national actors on the global working group for country-based pooled funds, which there's obviously a lot of discussion around those at the moment, which is also referred to as the PAC. So he's representing local and national actors broadly in this group. I also wanted to just mention that Mahmoud was not granted a visa for Germany, and therefore that's the reason he's joining us online and not in person, which of course is regrettable. Then lastly, but definitely not least, we have Lara with us, Lara Victoria Alzate. She's a member of the Assembly and the Strategic Team at Fundación Halu in Colombia, which is a NEAR network member. Laura is an economist, she's a master's student in development studies, and she's worked extensively on development and migration issues in Colombia. And through Fundación Halu, she also participates in regional initiatives on humanitarian governance and on localization across Latin America. So please join me in warmly welcoming our three speakers. And we will get started with the first round, where we wanted to set the stage a bit and discuss networks and why these are potentially important in advancing local humanitarian leadership. So I wanted to start with you, Lara, if you allow me. I wanted to hear from your experience in Colombia what role local networks play in advancing local humanitarian leadership and why it matters to come together collectively versus working as individual organization. If you could share your thoughts with us.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. I'm very glad to be here. First of all, I would like to say that Colombia is a country with multiple humanitarian crises, going not just from nature disaster related, but also events of displacement and confinement due to internal armed conflict, and as well situations of migration with people coming from the border country with Venezuela. In this context, networks, for example, NEAR, has been critically and key in advancing in more localized response by bringing together a variety of actors that have different capacities and that can actually complement each other and bring a more comprehensive response. These networks also offer a variety of advantages compared to working by individual organizations, including, for example, a greater capacity and complementarity, but also these networks are built on trust and cooperation, characterized by a collaborative support and a recognition of each other with more close related to community-based organizations. This mutual support and recognition also ends up with the common understanding of localization, not just as an individual organizational process, but a collective effort to strengthen local voices and the advocacy capacity of local actors. These elevate the voice of local actors, for example, to stages like this one, me being able to be participating in this Congress, but also in the recognition of their own capacities, not only from their own needs, but also from their own abilities to respond to those needs. Another advantage of networks is regarding the relevance in the response. By facilitating the action of those best suited to respond to humanitarian crises, And considering a more territorial and sociocultural approach, considering that a lot of contexts in Colombia differ one from another. So they're not one-fits-all response, and this knowledge from a variety of actors can actually help to have a more relevant response regarding this aspect. One key point of networks that networks can offer and that goes beyond individual organizations are collaborative learning. And this mutual support in exchange of methodologies, in improvement, in a continuous improvement of actions that will enable to have a more sustained response to crisis and in a more long term. One example of this particular aspect of how networks can work is the example of the project Together that reached out with original five organizations, local organizations, that then were developing kind of mentorships with each of them with 3 other organizations. So networks also act like a multiplier effect, or has a multiplier effect regarding this strengthening of capacities. So when it starts with 5 organizations, it ends up impacting 20 organizations in this particular project, in the setting of local capacities. So considering all of this, it is important then to understand that networks are so much more than just the sum of different organizations. So they are much more than this sum of organizations, because they are spaces of trust and learning and legitimacy that strengthens these local voices, and that also acknowledge that there is the ability and the capacity in local responders to address complex humanitarian crises. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura. And I really enjoyed the way you emphasized the complementarity between actors. Obviously, these are not homogeneous groups, but still finding the solidarity and ways to learn from each other and collaborate, which I think is very powerful. So thank you so much for that. Mahmoud, we want to go to you next, and I hope you can hear me well. I wanted to hear from you because we're talking a lot about networks, but the networks are not an end in itself. It's a means to an end. And so I wanted to hear from you, from your experience in Palestine, what difference does it make for the affected communities that you organize in networks? How does it impact the quality of humanitarian assistance that they receive? What are the benefits to affected communities that local and national actors are organized into networks? So over to you, Mahmoud, if you would share some thoughts on that with us.
Thank you, Lynn. I also would like to thank Lara and second her also points on the issues of the importance of networks. In the occupied Palestinian territory, civil society operates under what amounts to at least 4 controlling forces: the Israeli occupation, the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, the de facto authority in Gaza, and the donor community. Each uses methods to constrain our space. For over 3 decades, we have lived through protracted humanitarian crises driven by political causes and the systematic violation of international law. This multiplies the community suffering, not only from violence, but from defragmented, uncoordinated, and restricted aid. In this complicity, the national network is not a luxury, it's a lifeline. It allows us to speak with one unified message, to prevent fragmentation on issues like the type of aid, its geographical coverage, and reduce response time. It also enables us structured communication among all stakeholders. For example, our network has an observer seat at the humanitarian country team, and from that position, we represent affected community directly. We ensure aid reaches people in need, we protect their dignity, and we push for sustainability even under the most severe constraints. I want to be clear about the meaning of most severe constraint. In Gaza today, our staff coordinate aid under bombardment. complete. There is no humanitarian booth, no protected space, and no evacuation option for us. Yet we continue because the network gives us a collective strength and collective legitimacy that no single organization can hold alone. In addition, the network represents a trustworthy source of information that is reliable during a crisis. And in Gaza, while the international media has been totally blocked and local media and journalist personnel were targeted, and thankfully this morning session was talking also about these kind of violations, our network has been the voice of our communities, feeding all the news outlets with the real-time updates about the humanitarian situation. At the same time, we have complemented international efforts working alongside with the human rights organizations and groups to keep justice or to seek justice, advocate for ending the genocide, and challenging the weaponization of aid and starvation. So for our community, the network is not only a coordination body for aid delivery, it's delivering the truth. That is the difference for that a network can make.
Thank you so much, Mahmoud. I will turn over to you, Mori, because as I said in my introduction, you are known for working on female empowerment in South Sudan, have been a long advocate for women's rights. And so I wanted to ask you from that perspective as well, how working in networks can both advance the humanitarian response, but also improve the leadership of women-led organizations particularly. So would love to hear from you, from your experience in South Sudan on that.
Thank you. First, I would like to talk about South Sudan. Some of you doesn't know about South Sudan. This is a new country that emerged in 2011. It got its secession from Sudan. After 2 years, the country entered into crisis again, which of course is ongoing until now. As I'm talking, in December 2025, over 276 people was displaced and in Jonglei, and then most of these people who are affected are women and the girls experiencing rape, abduction, and then also a lot of chaos, and then there's a lot of famine coming up. Talking about the network, working in a network in South Sudan is the only option for us as we embark on the journey of humanitarian services. Why are we outstanding is because we are deep-rooted in the community. Our services, actually, we are the community ourselves. The women-led organization that champions this, like, for instance, the South Sudan Women-led Organization, the Young Women Christian Association, they are trusted within the organization. As a result, it is very easy for them because they are representative in different parts of the country. And then getting information is more easier from the grassroots up to the national level through this type of network. And then also, it makes it easy for them to report any incident that is happening, especially in terms of humanitarian, and find ways of how they can address it amicably and then immediately as it happens. And then also, working as women, we understand the context that we are working in, especially the cultural norms, which of course is happening. We know that the patriarchy system in some of the countries, like my own country, is so high. As a result, when we work in a network, it helps us to devise mechanisms of how to address issues that is affecting the women in particular through the network connections. And then also, by working collectively, we are able to amplify the voices of the voiceless. When I say the voiceless, that means the grassroots women and girls. So we amplify their voices. That is at the grassroots level. And then we now move into the national level. How does we connect as network from the grassroots to the national level? We actually create a platform where the women leaders can easily connect to the grassroots level, and then information flow can come from there, and then areas of advocacy and then policy review can be channeled through that one, even from the last person from the grassroots. So with this one, we know that the coordination part of it is very easy when we are using the network. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Modi, and thank you for always bringing women and girls to the center in these spaces. It's so important, and I really enjoyed how you emphasized also how you're able to bring information from the grassroots level up to the national level, which I think is one of the things that we as international NGOs and UN agencies can struggle with. So I think that's a very important advantage of these networks. Modi, I'm going to put you on the spot once again with another question, if you don't mind, because I know you have a lot of experience with the coordination system and the humanitarian leadership in South Sudan. And so I wanted to ask you, because we know that local and national actors have historically been sort of given tokenistic participation roles at times in these coordination spaces, but how does it empower local and national actors to take on more leadership in the country coordination, the clusters, the humanitarian coordination team, by organizing yourselves in these networks? If you could take us through that as well.
Yeah, you know, working as in a network helps the women, especially the women network I talked about, to actually air their voices at different clusters. For instance, taking leadership in different clusters. Some of the clusters that we have been able to co-lead is like the gender cluster, which of course is one of the clusters that is supporting and then addressing issues related to gender-based violence, violence against women, rape, as well as forced marriages in the community. So coming together as a network, it helps us also, upcoming organizations like the emerging new organizations, they get visibility, and then they are able to also have the bargaining power through learning from each other and then coming up with some solutions to the issues that is affecting them amicably, jointly. So their participation also, they are in better position to engage in clusters and also engaging with the donors, and then also air out issues that is affecting them locally. And then also, it facilitates sharing of information among maybe the international and then the local actors. So it facilitates these connections and coordination among all these network members. And then also it helps in institutional capacity for local women-led organization, and then also they learn from each other. For example, like us as YWCA, other upcoming network that is emerging, we as long-serving organization engage them in order to develop their policies, to develop their advocacy strategies, and come up with something that they can also use based on their visions and mission in that network. Thank you.
Thank you, Modi. And it's very interesting how both you and Laura are pointing out some of the same advantages in that local-led networks are leading to more sort of openness and sharing information with each other, to learn from each other, and takes away maybe also some of the competition that we know can infiltrate the humanitarian sector overall. So very interesting. Mahmoud, I wanted to come back to you, because we know when we engage with donors, they often say, well, we can't fund many different local and national actors. We have limited capacities. We can't manage grants to 200 different Palestinian local and national actors at once. And so that's often used to describe why funding to local and national actors are not possible. But in your experience from Palestine, how can organizing yourself into a network help channel funding to local and national actors, and help making the local and national actors themselves the intermediaries rather than relying on international actors? Over to you, Mahmoud.
Thank you, Lina. Yes, the network matters because the humanitarian responses already happens through multiple local systems and ecosystems, not through one central international system. The problem is not absence of local system, but they remain under-recognized, underfunded, and deliberately constrained. We understand donors have fears of losing oversight when funding multiple actors, but this concern is addressed through local networks. Because these networks were born from the affected community and carry a form of internal accountability that international structures do not mean downward accountability to the people they serve. Simply investing in local networks that have been strengthened to lead and make decisions in genuine consultation with their communities will address this fear. The issue is not whether the funds reach locally led actors. A response is locally led only when local actors hold decision-making authority over priorities and allocations and oversight. So the networks can act as meaningful intermediaries when they aggregate donor resources without flattering local diversity. Second, distribute through peer governance and contextual knowledge. Third, remain accountable downward to communities and peers, not only upward to donors. And finally, strengthen the local ecosystems rather than creating another concentration points. So we are not asking for a small fix, but we are asking for a different financing architecture, one that distributes authority across multiple locally and regionally led systems instead of keeping the dominant centered ones. Let me say this bluntly, the question is not whether donors can trust local networks. The question is whether donors are ready to share control, because the evidence from Gaza and from Palestine more broadly shows that local networks deliver, coordinate, and protect communities, even when the international system have withdrawn or failed. I mean, the question is whether the donors are ready for this relinquish of power. Over.
Thank you so much, Mahmoud. You're getting applauses from the audience. I don't know if you can hear it, if it transmits all the way to you. But thank you so much for emphasizing as well that local and national actors already have capacity. They're already delivering. And maybe it's a question, or very likely it's a question of whether donors and international actors are able to make that shift and trust in local and national actors and show the willingness. Laura, I wanted to hand over to you and ask you about whether these local and national actors are truly shifting leadership and power and making structural changes to the way the humanitarian response is operated in Colombia. We know that often it's been a bit of a tokenistic participation of local and national actors in decision making, but are networks a way to make this more fundamental shift in power to local and national actors from your experience in Colombia?
Thank you, Lynn. Well, even though in Colombia networks are more likely to be kind of new, or more recent, because for example, Project Together and Near Network are there since 2021, and some other networks are being even more recent. There have been important steps towards shifting power and organizing these collective efforts. And this has been done by centering discussions beyond funding and moving towards power, agency, and collective leadership. And I want to give here like 3 specific examples of these experiences. First is the co-leadership between Near Network and Oxfam of the leading in the multi-stakeholder spaces, such as the National Reference Group, which is reviewing the commitments that were subscribed in the Grand Bargain. So this is an example of how networks are being also recognized as governance actors with voice, but both as well, not only merely participation or consultative approach, which is quite a succeed and importance. Another example is regarding the platform of national humanitarian action in Colombia, the platform Panal, which is another network that originated from the flagship initiative, from the localization working group of the flagship initiative, and then become this network that is congregated over 300 organizations, among them local national organizations, but also community-based organizations. And they are participating in strategic advocacy in the country humanitarian team, which actually gives this important statement and reference regarding the unity and the representation of a great variety of organizations and local movements into these spaces of the architecture, of the humanitarian architecture. Another significant step on this mobilization of local actors through networks is that a variety of networks in Colombia, including together NIR, but also CAFI and also PANAL, and the working localization group, I think, the National Reference Group, subscribed this agreement that decided to call Cajica Agreement, and to understand that there are common grounds. There are a variety of networks, they are different perspectives, but there are also a common ground among them, and facilitate this consensus in order to approach international actors as a unity front. And this Cajica Agreement is a consensus that also set up 6 strategic points that are common to all these networks, that are important for all these networks to pursue. And those aspects are including not only direct funding allocation, but also advocacy, representation, and building up as well, and what Mahmoud also shared regarding accountability, not only bottom-up, but also top-down accountability to affected populations and accountability among peers, which is another perspective that needs to be considered and that is important right now in the discussions between networks and among networks. So even though these important steps have been happening, and it's some progress towards this redistributing of power and this shifting of power, there is still a lot to be done, and it has to be the cooperation of international actors and donors. And this means also a critical rethinking and reassess what is the role that of these actors are having in this humanitarian governance. Because it's not about, or networks are not just seeking for more participation, because participation is something that has been promised, and it's moving, but then we're also looking for a real shift in power and being recognized as political actors, as governance actors, with decision-making capacity and leadership capacity. And that is the real change that it has to be done. So it's not about just participation, but it's about this transformative aspect. This is really the path. This leadership is really the path to this transformative in redistributing power. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura, and very, very interesting to hear about the example about how you've gotten guidelines between several different networks in Colombia. I think that's something that could probably be replicated elsewhere, so thank you for sharing that. Mahmoud, I'm going back to you again in a second, but I just wanted to tell the audience that we're now doing one more round of questions, but then we will ask you for questions for the panelists. So I hope you will be prepared with some questions, so we will try to make this a bit more interactive for the next part. So Mahmoud, before we go to the Q&A session after this round, I wanted to ask you, because one of the things we keep hearing is that local and national actors are often subcontracted to implement programs that have been designed elsewhere. And I wanted to hear from you, from Palestine, what practical steps can be taken in order to move away from this role and to take on more of a leadership and a decision-making role in how programs are rolled out and designed. And also, what are your asks and recommendations to international NGOs? There are a lot of them in the room today, and also donors. What should they do differently to support you better?
Thank you, Lina. Yeah, I will go briefly. These are very direct questions, and I will be specific in sharing the asks. So, because we are beyond the stage of recommendation, we need commitments and real commitments. First is the direct, flexible, multi-year funding to national networks. And I mean national networks because most of the international intermediaries always fund based activities, not core funding. I mean, we here talk about funding networks should be based on the priorities and the scale that designed by us, not inherited from the global framework designed without us. So nothing about us without us. So the second is move from participation to authority. As mentioned by colleague Lara, leadership and decision-making must be owned by local networks and actors, while the role of international actors should shift to identifying where they add values, rather than assuming operational centrality. The system needs to move beyond internationally led delivery. The delivery can be made by local actors. This also means that changing the narrative around legitimacy. The assumption that legitimacy, neutrality, and capacity to automatically sit with international actors must be challenged openly, because in forums like this one, we in Gaza do not lack legitimacy. We lack the structural power that has been deliberately concentrated elsewhere. Third, honest and real risk sharing. In Gaza, our staff work under constant threat bombardment with no protection for humanitarian workers. International staff can be evacuated at any time, and when required, donors demand compliance from us, but accept excuses from INGOs regarding the risks. If we are to lead, we need the same tolerance from operational risk that international actors give themselves. And for the donors and international NGOs, here is our asks. Stop treating local leadership as a future aspiration and start working to achieve real structural change, and starting now, not after the next reform cycle. Shift to direct funding for national networks and local actors, and publish evidence-based data annually to show the level of change. Second, stop confusing inclusion with transformation. Local actors can be at the table while power remains external. A presence in a coordination meeting is not the same as shaping response strategy. Then for the international NGOs also, they have to publish the progress of the localization, not how much money passes through to local partners, but how many strategic decisions has been made by local actors. And then commit to reducing your own overhead as local leadership increases. This is the honest test. If you are serious, your budget should shrink as our grows. Move away from default international operational centrality. The biggest deliveries should rethink their roles as supportive and gap filling, and work with local actors on firm sunset commitments where their rules are no longer justified. Invest at scale in locally led pool fund and other locally governed financing mechanisms. Here we ask not to treat them as a pilots or exceptions, but as a foundation for a future financing architecture. Let me close with this. I am here today because the networks made it possible for me as a coordinator from Gaza to be part of this global conversation. But I also want to be honest. The fact that I have to travel to Berlin to be here is itself a structural problem. The power to shape a humanitarian decision should not require proximity to the European capitals. It should exist where the crises are. That is what localization must mean, not the representation at the margins, but authority at the center. I think we can move to the plenary and question and answer, because I like it more than these. Yes, okay.
Thank you, Mahmoud. I knew already from our preparation meetings that the passion which you speak with, it cannot be tamed. So you got a standing an ovation from the audience here. So I hope you could hear that. I think it's quite mind-boggling that a lot of the things you're asking us for are not new. It's direct multi-year flexible funding, it's risk sharing. These are all commitments under the Grand Bargain that we've been working on for 10 years. So for me, it's a bit, it begs for some reflection why we haven't been able to deliver on these commitments, because it's really not rocket science and it's nothing new, and we know what's asked of us. We're just not delivering. And Mori, that leads me to you, because also under the Grand Bargain and other policy discussions, there's a lot of discussion around equitable partnerships. So in your experience from South Sudan, what kind of investments do you as local and national actors, but also as networks, need in order to advance true local humanitarian leadership? How should these kind of partnerships be designed, and what are you asking for international NGOs and others who are partnering with you in South Sudan?
Thank you. In terms of partnership, we are looking at those that is actually, which of course is effective and the long-term based on trust. Because if there's no trust between the organizations, then it won't work very well. That's one thing. And then also we're looking at co-fundings, a co-funding that is actually which will allow networks to progress, not a short-term project that will end tomorrow and then the network kind of collapse. And then also we need to look at a partnership that is local actors get involved in co-creating of programs. For instance, this is the project. We need local partners to engage from the initial stage, as well as from the implementation and the final stage of it. We need to get involved. Involving the local partners will enable them to own the process and own the program, rather than creating something and imposing it on the local partners, or designing project everywhere and then just impose it on the local partners. This one is not really helping. And then also, for genuine partnership, local leaders need to invest in institutional capacity building. This one will enable the network to become stronger, as well as talking about simplifying mechanism of funding. Some funding mechanisms are very complicated for the local and national actors. Simply, for instance, in South Sudan, you get illiterate rate among women, which of course is approximately 85 down. And then you expect something genuine to come out of that if you make the request to be complicated. My request and my plea to this podium is like, they need to increase flexible funding to women-led organizations. Why am I saying this? Because the women-led organization deal directly with the victims. They are the victim themselves. They need to get funding directly and then flexible, which of course can make their work very effective. Secondly, there's need to support networks that address humanitarian issues. They need to get a specific support that can be able to move their network to move on very well. With other things, I think I'll be able to come again back. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Muri. And it's always eye-opening that you're mentioning core funding, because I wonder how many of our INGOs would function the way we do, as professionally as we do, or hopefully do, if we didn't have core funding. And so the expectation that local and national organizations can only survive on project funding is also a bit paradoxical. And also, I'm hearing a lot of conversations lately about sort of transitioning to a localized response. But we have to acknowledge as well that coordination is not for free. It costs resources. The cluster systems are also taking up enormous resources. So a very good point that there also needs to be funding for the networks and for their operations. So thank you so much for underlining that for us. Laura, I'm going to end with you. I wanted to ask you sort of we have a lot of INGOs here in the room today, and if they have not yet gone into supporting networks, what steps can they take? What are your recommendations for increasing the support for locally led networks in different humanitarian contexts?
Okay, thank you, Lynn. Well, I wouldn't like to be repetitive, but I must be, because I will be building up on what my colleagues already said and recall about funding, because it's quite core at this point. So direct, flexible, and multi-year core funding. But we have heard this quite a long time, yeah? So and we have heard as well of how give this direct funding as locally as possible, as international as needed. But I wonder is this really as possible as we can right now direct funding to local and national organizations through networks? I would doubt it. Yeah, especially because we are aware of concerns of donors, of international organizations, of UN agency systems, regarding, for example, capacity, accountability, transparency. However, local organizations, national organizations have already been in processes of strengthening capacities, also supported by international organizations, also supported by donors. So at what stage is this going to move forward to a really direct funding allocation? And I want to call, or to share with you the experience of the 3 organizations, part of the consortium supported by the Diakonia Catastrophe HIP, that were actually certified with the Humanitarian Quality Assurance Initiative regarding the core humanitarian standards. So they are already certified as capable of fulfillment of the humanitarian principles of accountability, of transparency, and yet we're still pleading, we're still here talking about direct funding allocation as possible as could be, and as international as needed. So there have been some steps, but we need to move forward, yeah? And we need to build on the efforts that have already been done, but moving forward. So this funding aspect is quite important in this sense. Additionally, because operational autonomy, it doesn't go without resources. And this operational autonomy means that networks are capable of delivering or funding community-based and community-led responses through these networks, through these fundings. And this will result in communities' collective solutions for communities' collective problems, not those assigned of an external agenda or an international agenda, which is some aspects of that humanitarian action has been historically done. Another aspect of this advancing on genuine transfer is about regarding the shared governance mechanisms and how to coordinate spaces with equitable partnerships and with the presence of networks and national and local NGOs and organizations. The horizontal relationships based on trust, validating and acknowledging the capacities of local actors and the knowledge of local actors. And as Modi also said, the strengthening of local capacity through this core funding again. Yeah? So it's not just the operational capacity, but also, for example, the legal team, the communications team. How can actually networks and national organizations give some visibility to their actions, because there are a lot of actions that are not really being seen or that are not being recognized as those implemented by local and national actors. So in this regard, I'm coming back again. I'm sorry if I'm being too repetitive regarding the funding allocations. So with the efforts of, for example, with the country-based pool funds that has been coordinated by OSHA, what about pool funds coordinated by the same networks? Yeah, and with the capacity of organizations such as the ones participating in NIAR, the ones participating in PANAL, that have a lot of trajectory and the capacity to also addresses and administrative these aspects of the funding. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura, and thank you for reminding us that, particularly also in a response like in Colombia that is very protracted, there is so much capacity, and so we need to stop talking about always capacity building of local and national actors. And don't apologize for the repetition, because clearly there's something we're not getting, and it's also interesting to hear how you and Modi and Mahmoud make a lot of the same points. So it reinforces each other and underlines the messages. So thank you so much, Laura, for your recommendations as well. We're now going to go to a Q&A part of this discussion. So we would very much like to hear your questions. Please do introduce yourself. So say who you are and what organization you're coming from, so that Laura, Modi, and Mahmoud know exactly who they're responding to. And yeah, please raise your hand if you have a question, and we'll pass a mic.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I am Fernanda from Fundación Multitudes organization and Latin America organization. So in many global South contexts, networks often function as protection ecosystems, such as spaces of trust, rapid response, and collective legitimacy, not only coordination platforms. How can international networks better support these protective functions without unintentionally weakening local dynamics?
Thank you. And maybe we take two more, and then we let you answer collectively. Yeah.
This one and this one, yeah. Simone Klavitter, humanitarian. So I have spent the last 5 years either in Gaza, based in Gaza, working for the UN or for the European Union in the West Bank for the last 2 years. My question for you, Mahmoud, is where do you see, very practical, where do you see your place in the New Horizon Fund, which was recently established by the PA and the UN? Where would you like to see yourself playing a role? And then one more, which is a bit more provocative for us, or for me at least, and from the international community. What we want to see in Gaza is a democratic government. Elections are coming, so I'm not going into this very broad and wide field of political discussions. But if we shift service delivery, and even if it's humanitarian, and humanitarian is a very broad term in Gaza, to local NGOs, this weakens the envisioned new Palestinian government. If it is via the peace board or not, I'm not going into this discussion. It's more the broad statement that NGOs do have a role to play, but for me it's more on the advocacy level than on the social service delivery level. And the more they're engaging in social service delivery, the weaker is the governance system we are trying to establish. I would love to hear what you think about it.
Patrick Alara from the New Humanitarian. Yeah, from the New Humanitarian. So the 2019 ODI reports showed that even for communities in the worst crisis, most resources are local, from neighbors helping neighbors, governments helping their constituents, and diaspora remittances. So I'm wondering whether in the context of this conversation there is thinking about looking at that as a source of funding, because for as long as your funding is coming from outside, there's going to be priorities that are imposed on you that are not necessarily yours. So I'm wondering whether that's something that is being considered here. The second question would be, as Tamam spoke earlier, there are multiple humanitarianisms. So there are multiple ways of working as humanitarians, multiple humanitarian traditions. Are we here sort of speaking of having kind of the local humanitarian traditions reflect what the international system is, or is there scope for the international system to basically plug into different traditions of humanitarianism, and what would that actually look like?
Maybe we start with these three, and then we will take a few more just to give everyone a chance to still remember the questions. So, Mahmoud, there was one specifically on Palestine, which maybe I'll let you answer first, but also, of course, welcome to answer any of the other two questions if you have any thoughts on that. But maybe, Mahmoud, I can start with you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks also, Simon, for raising the question. The Palestinian civil society organization governance and mandate is actually has been set in the law and the constitution when the PA has been established. And their role as a watchdog for the performance of the government. But in this kind of humanitarian crisis, in the absence of the response by the government, and also all the constraints has been put on the international community and especially UNRWA, for example, has forcibly put the local organization to interfere and to start to support the affected communities in any kind of means that they have. To be honest, just when all the schools has been totally destroyed, and 90% of the people has been displaced several times. So what the networks and the local NGOs has to do? They try to take innovation to start to build kind of response mechanism that's for the health system, support the health system which has been collapsed, support the education system also with establishing a kind of temporary learning spaces under the tents to make the education process going on. I mean, what you expect from local organization to do with monitoring the performance or the transparency of a government in this kind of it's not an emergency, it's a genocide situation. I think with the issues about the UN and PA or EU and BA kind of conditions about reform of the Palestinian government. This has been an issue for over almost 2 decades, and the Palestinian Authority doesn't have kind of able to either reject or to proceed. It is under also confinement by the Israeli occupation. They have nothing. I mean, when we talk about the board of peace, also mean the same as well with all the Palestinian nationals who are a member of this board of peace. They don't have a decision authority as well. The decision authority has been by Miladinov and also the Trump. So also the financial issues relating to the Gaza and National Committee for Administrative of Gaza, it's called the ANCAG, they don't have control of anything. And they have been totally blocked up to this moment from getting into Gaza. So with this kind of situation, I don't see that the national organization have an option to shift from aid delivery to a kind of watchdog role for the government. I hope I answered the question to you, but if there's anything, and we can continue. Over.
Thank you, Mahmoud. Then maybe over to you, Modi or Laura. There were two additional questions, if I understood correctly. One on sort of the embedment of protection and the role in protection in networks, and then the one from our colleague from the new humanitarian around alternative funding sources, that maybe we can't rely fully on grant funding, if I understood you correctly, and we need to look at some of these remittances and neighbor-to-neighbor funding rather than to rely only on grant funding. And a reference to these multi-humanitarianisms and whether we should play within sort of the current humanitarian structure or look elsewhere. So Modi, maybe I can put you on the spot, and if you have any thoughts on either of these questions or both, we would love to hear from what you're thinking.
Thank you. Maybe I will respond to the network and maybe the question regarding the only coordination and the information sharing. Actually, I didn't want to go deep because of the time. This network, we have a link because it's a loose network, whereby the government cannot hold one organization accountable and they cannot seize your license. So it's a loose network whereby if there's anything that happened, all of us will come up. For instance, last year but one, a girl was forced into marriage, and then against her will, she said, no, I cannot marry that man. And then suddenly, the brothers, the father pierced her eyes with in terms of like, why did she refuse? Because they're using her for wealth. And then all of us as network came up and advocate for this rights of this girl. Secondly, a girl was forced into marriage, and then she was one of our network member, a young girl in university, and then she was forced to go and marry an old man in the village. And then because of the advocacy and the capacity building we are doing to young women, she stood up and we backed her up to the court, and then her case was resolved. So these are the result of network, how we are working, not only in coordination and other things, but also it is result-oriented based on what we are thinking. Thank you.
Thank you, Muri. And Lara, it's always difficult to be the last one with the remaining questions, but if you have any thoughts on maybe the funding question, but also any of the other questions, if there's any thoughts you want to share with the audience.
Okay. So regarding, for example, funding, the reality now is that we are having constraints in funding, yeah, and it's a reality. It's not an invention. And for example, in the case of Colombia, the retrievement of the USAID funding was quite important because it was quite of the larger donors in there. So there is an importance to diversify the funding, or where is the funding coming, because then might happen situations of dependency like the ones that we saw when this USAID retrievement of funding, and then all the system kind of collapsed. So this also shows lessons regarding this variety of funding. And in this aspect, what the colleague was also mentioning regarding, for example, conditions that may arise of the funding allocation, it is important to be, or to acknowledge the potential of networks, actually. In having like these similar mechanisms as the country-based pool funds, and having the autonomy to use this funding and these pool funds that would be concentrated in the networks to facilitate community-based responses to crisis, following their own priorities and their own needs and their own solutions, and not only or not being supported by these external conditions of funding. So that is quite another potential of networks in this context.
Thank you, Laura. Then I wanted to see if there are more questions. We could do a second round of questions. I see an arm up in the very back there, and there's also a gentleman here on the second row that would like to ask a question, I think.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Please go ahead in the back first, and then we pass you the word.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I'm Leah from MDM, Doctors of the World. Mahmoud, you mentioned earlier the complementarity between actors, but you all also talked about the challenges of working with donors and international NGOs. I would like to ask the panelists, what do you think are the added value of international NGOs today, or if you would be happy to do without us at all? Thank you.
Thank you. I am Mansoor from London, Ahmadiyya Muslim community. I just need to know, without facing any difficulty or challenge, how can local and national actors ensure good governance and trust in respect of power of networks? Thank you.
All right, and I don't see any other questions if I'm not mistaken. There is one in the very back there with a hand up. We take a third and last question if I'm not. It's a very bright light, so I don't see you so clearly, but I think, yeah.
That's okay. My name is Dida Silva, and I'm from Goal Global. Just two questions, actually. First of all, how do local networks that you are familiar with measure the impact they are making? And what challenges have you had to overcome working with networks who measure impact in different ways? And secondly, who chooses what group can join a local network? Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Maybe Muri, I could start with you to change the order a little bit. So please go ahead with any of these questions that you want to answer first.
Yeah, let me talk about the added value for international organization. We are not, in the localization, we are not campaigning against the international organization to quit. What we are saying is like we can co-lead in whatever we are doing. We need the service for the international organization because they bring on board something that is not locally found. So as a result, we still need their service in the country. Secondly, on the local network, the question that was raised here, it was local network? Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I can answer it correctly, but maybe Rola, you can do it because I didn't get the question clearly.
Okay, we can go to you, Laura, next, but you don't have to answer that one. You can choose yourself because we gave you the hardest round last time. I would be really intrigued because it's very interesting. South Sudan is a very different response than Colombia. How do you see the role of INGOs, if you have any thoughts on that? And also, any thoughts on any of the other questions would be very welcome.
Yeah, no, I will address as well the question of INGOs. And as I also mentioned at one point in the panel, it's not about, also with the comments of Modi, it's not about quitting international organizations or make them disappear. And I think it's also related with the international networks that can be arise as well. But understanding that this is, that the humanitarian governance is the involvement of different actors. And international organizations are one of those actors. And in that sense, what we're talking about is how to reassess and rethink the role that international organizations have taken so far or have been having so far, in order to address also this shifting humanitarian space and to shift as well this role. So moving beyond intermediaries, moving beyond these administrators of resources, and going more towards our more supportive allies and strategic allies, strengthening local voices and networks. So that would be a key aspect regarding the positions of INGOs, because it's not about and I would call out one of the terms that we've been hearing a lot in this Congress about the ecosystems. Yeah, it's not about the ego of international organizations. It's not about the ego of networks. It's not about ecosystems, but ecosystems of humanitarian response and the interactions between and among different actors, recognizing that we all have different roles and that this shift of power needs this critically assess of each and everyone's roles.
Great, thank you so much, Lara. Mahmoud, the last difficult questions to you, I think it was particularly for you about the value NGOs, but if you have any thoughts also on how you measure impacts in your network and also how you choose who can be part of the Palestinian NGO network, that would be very helpful. Over to you.
Yeah. I will go for the question from Leah for the added value of the networks and also whether they are needed or not. I mean, this is one of a very valid question. I mean, we are talking about self-reliance and self-determination, self-sufficiency, capacity development. I mean, the goal is to have the local and civil society able to maintain its life, its resources, its power, to be able to put the plans to face crisis and whatever. So there is added value for the presence of international organizations. They have experience, they have ability to access international legal frameworks. They can have the reporting the violation. I mean, they have easier tools and facilities to report about it. And this kind of issues is added value. But when it comes to the need of them or they have to quit, I don't think that they have to quit. They have to put exit strategies facing out when they completely handed their message, complete their efforts to make the people that they have to serve, that they end their mission. So I think this needs to be a kind of a planned, and it's got to be gradual. But at the end, yes, they should be there when there is a crisis, need to find response that the local community cannot or do not have the resources and the abilities to respond for. When it comes for the other question from Dita Silva, how it works, measure impact, I think the impact is always challenging with networks because it's always, the network doesn't provide direct service delivery to the beneficiaries. They coordinate the delivery, they coordinate the messages, amplifying the voices. So it's the measuring impact is on how they can influence the laws and regulation in the country that they are doing, protecting the civic space, how they can protect the local civil society to perform their rules as a members. And regarding also the who chooses the members of the network, I mean, let me talk about our organization. We in Palestine we have more than 3,000 local local civil society organization. Our network has only 150 members organization because we have strict rules and criteria for choosing our members. I mean, you design and you decide which kind of members you can join. However, when we have additional level of membership in our sectors, because we have sectors, the health sector, the education, the women, the protection with the people with the disability rehabilitation. youth. So any national organization can join these kind of sectors based on their activities, on the response of these sectors. So these can be like a member in affiliates in the sectors, but not a full membership with the organization. I mean, they don't have voting voices in the elections. This is different. Just I want to mention one thing also about the funding issue and diversification and funding for the networks. If you remember the US aid cut, we as a national network and all our members have not been negatively affected by cutting of the US aid cut. Why? Because our basic laws and our statutes prevent us from accepting any political conditional funding. And to get the US fund, you have to sign on different anti-terrorist acts that label the Palestinian resistance and all the many as terrorists. So our members and our basic law doesn't accept to sign such kind of conditions. So we have been protected from these kind of consequences by the US aid cut. I hope I answered some of the questions, but over.
You surely did. Thank you so much. We have 10 minutes left, and I thought we could, this was Muri's suggestion, it was a very good suggestion, we do a little rapid fire conclusion round. So just really 1 or 2 minutes with your top takeaway. What do you want this audience in Berlin of German NGOs, academia, maybe there are some representatives from the government in the room. What do you want them to walk away with? What is your 1 or 2 key recommendations, key asks? What should they walk away with? Muri, can I start with you?
Sure. I still will repeat the support, like the funding allocation for the local and national organization, that the direct funding and flexible funding for the sustainability of the work that they are doing in the community, especially in the conflicting situation. Secondly, at least we need a union and a equitable partnership, which of course is not based on project, but also which of course is based on a reality and how we can work equally with no segregation or lower partner or this one partner, not implementing partners, but has co-lead in different aspects that we are working in. Thank you.
Thank you, Muri. Over to you, Lara, for your key takeaways.
Yes, I think it's important to each actor analyze deeper what is the role that are playing in the humanitarian ecosystem, and as well regarding direct funding, if there is, and what are actually the mechanisms that are not really, or that are kind of avoiding of this direct funding to happen more extensively. Because these are, maybe they're not mechanisms because they are too bureaucratic, because they are by institutionalized rules are exactly excluding in local and national networks and actors to even access this kind of funding. So this takeaway is kind of summarizing the panel as well, that transferring power is not just talk, but it's action. And this action is regarding direct funding, shared governance, and the recognition of local networks and national networks as political actors with decision-making and leadership capacities. Thank you.
Fantastic. Mahmoud, can I also ask you very sort of top line, what should people here in the room walk away with? What are your key recommendations?
I think advocacy for the protection of humanitarian principles and the human rights. They should focus on that because it's the essence of our mandate as a humanitarians. When there's the absence of the and impunity on the war crimes, nothing would be, everything would be justified in the future. Killing, genocide, starvation, and unfortunately we have seen it growing. So the added value for the international organizations, and especially in Europe and in Germany, I think, is to have the voice raised at the European capitals on the protection of humanitarian principles and international law. Regardless, it has been made some years by some people, but I mean, this is the first thing. The second thing is the dialogue. You need to understand the narrative from the person directly, or from the entity directly, or from the actor, the local actor directly, not to base your decisions on fake stories or narrative listened from other entities. And this happened in exactly after the October 7th, when some German organization cut the ties with and stopped the projects with the Palestinian non-governmental organizations just without informing them. And this really something needs to be addressed genuinely with how this kind of decision has been taken without giving just any information to this organization, just only send them the cut of aid or terminate the contract. This is not acceptable, and I think we need to protect the humanitarian workers and focus these international organizations in Europe and in the world. They have the capacity to do it, and they should do it and put it in agenda to make ourselves and the humanitarian worker safer at any time. Over.
Thank you so much, Mahmoud. We are coming towards the end of this session, and so I wanted to extend a very warm thank you to Mahmoud, to Modi, and to Laura for joining us today. It looks like just an hour and a half on a stage, but there's been a lot of preparation work, a lot of coordination, and several of them, Modi particularly, has traveled across continents to be here. So I really want to thank you for your effort in coming and joining us and sharing your experiences with the audience today. To sum up a little bit of the discussion, I just wanted to highlight a few points. I think we're in a very interesting time, right? Like there's a lot of discussions about the humanitarian reset. We're talking a lot about simplicity. We want to deliver at scale, and localization is often reduced to sort of a percentage of funding that go to local and national actors. And I think in that perspective, I think locally led networks provide a really nice alternative, a really nice counterweight. I was very encouraged by hearing about, and I think several of you mentioned this, the learning, the collaboration, the solidarity that networks allow for, taking out some of the competition that can at times poison the way humanitarian actors work. It's also very powerful to hear how they are able to speak with one voice. Donors know one place to ask for information or to engage. They are able to get better representation, better leadership, and also better access to funding. It was also encouraging to hear about the complementarity in skills and how they were able to benefit from different local and national actors being in different geographical locations and with different skill sets, and sort of layer this kind of capacity. I think we've also heard how we are able through local networks to link the grassroots with the national level, which is something that has often been very difficult to do, and we often lack this grassroots level information, so also very powerful. It is clear that there are still tensions that remain. There is a clear tension between what we're saying we're going to do and what happens in reality. Which makes it really difficult to have a real conversation and a real negotiation, because you get the feeling there's a dishonesty about what we're really willing to do. I think there's also a fundamental tension in the humanitarian sector at the moment. again, you have this reset focus on efficiency, severity of needs, scale, centrality of power and money with OCHA and other UN agencies. And then you have sort of the grand bargain language around risk sharing, quality funding, localization. And these two sides are clashing a little bit at the moment. And a strong recommendation to move on from looking at localization as only a % of funding and looking at it as a real shift in power and decision-making spaces. So yeah, I walk away inviting you to also think about where we place this discussion. Should local and national actors just adapt to our international system, or will there be a space where they can fundamentally rethink and do things differently, and maybe we adjust to their existing systems for once? Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Thank you for your questions, and of course, the biggest thank you to our 3 panelists for being with us today. We are around the next 3 days, the 3 of us at least, and particularly Modi and Laura, you probably want to speak to more than me. So do come and tap us on the shoulder if you would like to ask more questions or discuss anything related to South Sudan and Colombia. And also, Mahmoud, we hope to have you with us in person for future sessions. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.